Today is Monday, May 13th of 24, and I want to say something that I've said before. If you can't be a patient gardener, at least be a lazy gardener, because it has the same payoff sometimes. When I first moved here last fall, I dug up a bunch of stuff, a bunch of native stuff, some Arundinara, some smilax, and then this stuff, Peltandra virginica. I had it all in this Rubbermaid container sitting in water because they all like a lot of moisture. And the Peltandra, I dug that up from a bog. It was a mess, but I put it in here and it died just a couple days later. And I was like, well, oh well, it's gone. And then when I transplanted the smilax and the Arundinara out of this container, I evidently totally forgot this was here, and this nasty, soupy mess has been sitting at the back of my property for, I don't know, months, since last fall. And I walked by the other day and I was like, oh, I didn't remember I even had that. That's pretty cool. So it's back from the dead. I've got another example of that over here. On the way to this, we're going to stop and look at these opuntia because they're blooming. Look at that. There's a whole bunch of new flower pods. I'm going to take a shortcut and step down over this stuff and try not to get the glockids in my leg. I've got all kinds of flower pods getting ready to open up on these opuntias. But this is the other plant, this Arundinara. I've transplanted a bunch of this stuff. I've had decent success, maybe 60 or 70%, but sometimes it dies. This was in the ground in the little wet weather stream behind my house, and a few weeks after transplanting up here, it all looked like this one. It was all totally dead, and I was like, oh well, it's gone. And then it sat here for months and months being totally dead, and then the dead stalks came back to life, and now they're all green, so that's pretty cool. I used to call plants zombie plants when they came back from the dead, and then I realized there's a much more profound insight to be gained. The resurrection from the dead is something that happened occasionally in the Bible. Of course, Jesus is the most shining example, but it started all the way back in the Old Testament. You know, Elijah brought the widow's son back from the dead. There was the Jewish soldier who they laid his body in the grave of, was it Elijah or Elisha? And when his body touched the bones of Elisha or Elijah, he was reanimated. He came back to life. And then, of course, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. He raised that 12-year-old girl. And whenever he raised her from the dead, he said, Talitha, kumi. And when Mark wrote down the gospel, you know, Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the gospels were all written in Greek. But Mark didn't translate that saying, as well as a couple other things, a couple other sayings. The gospel writers left in Aramaic. And one of the theories is that they were just such iconic statements that they wanted to just leave them intact the way that they were. So kind of like if you say, I'll be back. And I have a horrible Arnold impersonation, but when you hear that, you know who said it and what movie it's from. Same thing when Jesus says, Talitha, kumi, which means, little girl, get up. Or when he said, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? So anyway, plants come back from the dead sometimes if you're a lazy gardener. And if you believe in Jesus, then you will come back from the dead, but not in the same way that it has happened before. The final resurrection, eye has not seen and ear has not heard and has not entered into our minds the things that await us. So